How's it going, guys? My name is Graham and welcome to Two Left Thumbs. This year for Halloween I wanted to do something a little bit different, something that I think could potentially become a fun annual tradition here on the channel. I am so fascinated by horror movies that are continually rebooted and persist for decades despite having numerous flops and failures. Somewhat ironically, considering it's a literal trope of slasher horror movies, they just keep coming back and somehow those wells never run dry. One of my personal all-time favorite horror series is Final Destination. I probably got into it because I'm a bit of a wimp with horror and it's not that scary of a series, it's mostly just gory good fun. I'm gonna do something a little different here in the interest of time, considering I'm starting putting this together so late in October, is I'm basically gonna do a live reaction to each of these movies and cut that up into more of a condensed format. Maybe I'll do like a summary, review, or ranking at the end. It'll just be fun for me, something new. We'll see what people think of that. And yeah, it means I will actually legitimately have time to put this together before Halloween. Something I almost never directly do in my videos, I want to quickly plug the Two Left Thumbs Patreon. Because I'm going to be using so much movie footage, there's just no chance this video gets monetized. So yeah, that's another way I can, hopefully make something off this work. It took longer to put together than I thought it would. You can support the channel for as little as $1. You get your name in the credits. I'm working to add more to it. And the more people we have, the easier it is to build on. So if you're at all interested, maybe give that a look. I'll have a link in the description below. For anyone unfamiliar with the series, the general idea is that the Grim Reaper, I suppose, is trying to kill a bunch of people. Just to get his kicks, I guess. I guess I'm not that confident in what the plot is revisiting these movies, going in semi-blind, it's been a lot of years. But in one way or another, through a premonition, these groups of people escape their intended time of death. And because they were destined to die in this event that they narrowly avoided, the Grim Reaper is then stalking them, trying to kill them in these overly contrived Rube Goldberg-style setups. Each death in these movies is so wild and over the top and not at all believable, but that's not what this series is about. It is entirely worth it for me just to see those insane, ridiculous payoffs. Starting off with Final Destination 1, dating back to 2000. This opening title sequence is pretty silly, pretty over the top, dramatic music, these screams from women laced into the background. It tells you a little bit about the movie to come with the airline ticket. I don't know why it spends so much time on this oscillating fan. Seriously, we're 2 minutes in and 50% of everything on screen has been fan. It's been a long time since I've watched any of this series. I'm surprised how young this lead actor actually looks. I believe that he's a teenager.
Live it up, Alex. You got your whole life ahead of you.
Ooh. But seriously, why does the dad deliver it like he's about to punch a hole through the wall? The spinning propellers of the airplane model. Fun foreshadowing. That 180 transition with the clock in the airport, legitimately kinda cool. God, I wish Sean William Scott was in more things. It's such a specific thing to be excited about, but I'm stoked. As someone who was 8 years old in the year 2000, it's sometimes hard for me to think back on what fashion trends there were. Everyone has this vaguely gelled hairstyle, and most clothes are baggy and ill-fitting. Lots of button-ups and lots of stripes. Belly shirts. Yeah, we really had things figured out back then. Perfect. Everyone's looking sharp. Ooh, Final Destination, that's the name of the movie. I kinda like Canceled, Departed, Terminal. It makes sense, I guess, why they would have had an airport setting. Why is there so many words associated with airports that have to do with death and dying? This guy's overly descriptive in his pre-boarding shitting strategies, but he makes some good arguments. The mild slow-mo and whooshing sound effects here and there are pretty cheesy, but I think it's kind of effective in setting the tone, creating a little bit of tension, some anxiety leading up to the actual event. It just beats you over the head non-stop. I kind of love it.
That's a good sign. Younger the better to be a fucked up guy to take down this plane.
It's a much more humorous way to go about saying, surely this plane won't crash. That'll never happen. This is the rustiest, dumpiest looking plane of all time. I don't think you need a premonition to think that this plane might be a risk. Every corner of it they show is grimy and rusty looking. Things are just breaking left and right. The true horror of this movie should just be how unbearable flying is. It's all just one extended version of like a Jerry Seinfeld punchline. What's the deal with airline food? Wouldn't it be crazy if we all died in a dramatic plane crash? Oh, that Kramer. I love how early in his career Seann William Scott exclusively played the obnoxious dickhead. Then only a few years later he put a bit of muscle on and started playing the suave, likable, nice guy, cool guy. Love that for him. I think the degree to which everyone loses their absolute shit when this plane starts, I don't know, tail spinning? It's pretty accurate feeling. There's explosions, fires, things start ripping into pieces. How did it go this wrong? I kind of remembered this being the most tame of the deaths of our characters in this whole franchise, because it more or less came down to the entire plane just exploding front to back. People are getting sucked out of the plane, objects are bashing people in the face, big blood splatter, people burning alive. It doesn't hold a candle to what comes later in the franchise, but it's pretty intense. I love that from everyone's outside perspective, while the main character starts freaking out, to them it's gonna look like he thinks the plane is about to explode simply because that little latch on the tray came off. A tiny piece of plastic breaks off.
Fucking plane's gonna explode!
These security people must be really sick of dealing with these kids as shit. Man, that plane blows up immediately, doesn't it? Yeah, bet you feel real bad for yelling at him a minute ago.
I'm Agent Ween, this is Agent Shrek.
Tell me your movie came out before 2001 without telling me your movie came out before 2001. They understandably accuse Alex of potentially having an involvement in blowing up the plane. It's pretty horrifying that this guy lost his brother and that they all just lost like 40 of their colleagues and peers. I actually do like that most of the people who ended up getting off the plane got off for different reasons. Alex had a panic attack, this guy's brother told him to get off, she got off because she believed Alex, this guy and his girlfriend got off for getting in a fight, and Seann William Scott got off because he kind of just got caught up in the chaos. Considering this movie is only 90 minutes, it spends a fair amount of time on the setup. Considering it's the first movie in the series, I understand that. The concept is a little weird. You kind of want to pay a bit of time letting people stew in the sorrow and mourning everyone they just lost before taking that turn towards more campy, silly horror. 287 deaths. Damn it, I got my first jump scare and it was just from a crack of lightning. I'm such a wimp. Is it touching or patriotic or kind of weird when everyone dies in a plane crash to make the memorial something with wings? I can't tell, but it feels in poor taste. These two are really attached at the hip, hey? This sort of weird standing spooning seems inappropriate at a funeral.
I'm never gonna die.
Bold statement. Let's see how that pans out for him. In the first 2 seconds of Seann William Scott on screen, I thought I remembered him being an obnoxious character just based on the way he was eating his snack. Turns out he's like awkward and insecure. Dude's got range. I will die on the hill that Seann William Scott is amazing and underappreciated. This teacher is understandably terrified of this main character whose name I have failed to learn at this point. I don't know, I just kind of commended the movie for having relatively realistic reactions and a variety of grief responses. People are turning to him for answers or just feel like they owe their life to him or are terrified. Alex. I had to look it up. His name is Alex. The Grim Reaper, so sinister. Closing doors, dripping faucets, torture. The fan is officially a recurring character. Alex becomes a bit of a conspiracy nut, consuming every VHS news report, book, everything he can get his hands on relating to plane crashes. I want his plaid bucket hat up on that lamp there. That is a good hat. Classic teenage boy sees a picture of a girl in a newspaper and immediately pulls out a Penthouse magazine. Classic cutting yourself shaving while you're completely clean shaven. Smooth move. And on the first stroke, come on, man. It's like you're trying to fail. Unplugging the stereo by pulling directly on the cord? You're asking for it, man. I do love this movie's commitment to fake outs. The dripping water plugging in the stereo. You're expecting him to get shocked to death. This franchise does this sort of thing continuously. That water just has no regard for gravity, chasing him around the room. And also weirdly blue. You should probably get your taps checked. Oh god, his eyes turning red is so gross. Just stand up. Why aren't you standing up? I know the tub is slippery, but like, come on, man. Your feet aren't made out of soap. That is a truly gruesome first death. And the Grim Reaper takes back the water? Come on, man. Are you actually gonna rob this guy of his dignity of being able to claim this was an accident? Now everyone's gonna have to assume it was autoerotic asphyxiation? Real dick move from the Reaper. Oh no, the parents think it was a suicide and that it was Alex's fault. I have never seen a van with coroner in big bold letters on the side like that. I'm not sure that's a real vehicle type. Ooh, a green leaf falling. Very metaphorical. Plucked in its prime. I don't know about you guys, but I've never met this quirky artist character who welds things together out of junk and scraps in their backyard. But based on what movies have told me, there are like millions of them out there. I really like Allie Larder. I mostly knew her from growing up watching Heroes. It's fun to remember that she's in these movies. And considering that her name is Clear Rivers, not Claire, like I first thought it was, Clear, I'm not surprised she has a weird home life and turned into the type of person that makes statues out of weird junk. These characters have been surrounded by death the last few days, are traumatized and scarred in ways that are going to follow them the rest of their lives. And they want to break into a morgue to go look at their dead friend? They broke into the morgue and then this guy decided to just watch from the corner? No, carry on. Do whatever it was you guys were planning on doing. What a wildly understanding mortician.
In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes.
Pretty cool, but very spooky little speech. Interesting inverse explanation and deterministic view of things being death's design rather than some divine entity's plan. Our destiny is controlled by death, not life. I mean, it's nonsense, but it's a cool premise that I can easily get behind. He really ends his speech on a high note as well. They do not take the mortician's speech on death with any sort of grain of salt. They instantly take it literally and commit to it wholeheartedly. I mean, he's right. His conclusion ends up being correct, but it in no way feels logical. How stoked do you think they were to find a song with Final Destination somewhere in the lyrics? And 9 Inch Nails, no less? Kind of a great fit for such a dreary, death-oriented movie. The way they set up and tease that death is not subtle, but then the payoff is still very sudden. And there's like this weird sick humor that her final words were drop dead. These movies are really twisted in that particular way.
Claire, he's in the shower.
Is everyone calling her Claire? I can't even tell anymore. I love when characters just state observations to themselves quietly in a room. Alex, what are you doing? This teacher is having one continuous breakdown on a minute-to-minute basis. You gotta not stalk her. Or if you feel that you need to save her life, don't get caught so easily. Man, if you explain this to the FBI agents, you're for sure ending up in an institution. And if you do end up getting proven right, they're gonna think that you somehow played a role in her death. They're not going to think you're some genius who discovered death's design. How are you going to prove it? Are they going to go ask the mortician for his opinion? The movie does get bogged down a bit by continually needing to explain to the audience, to other characters, to these FBI agents, and on and on and on, the ideas of death design and all those other things. It's just kind of an unfortunate, near unavoidable consequence of this being the first movie in this franchise. It's actually quite reasonable that these FBI agents were ready to move on until people who survived the plane crash themselves started dying. Then they kept a closer eye on Alex.
Now, can you promise me that no one else is going to die?
Obviously, people are going to die, Agent Shrek.
No, I can't.
Correct answer, Alex. That's entrapment. You were this close to being held accountable for every death that were to happen for the rest of eternity. This is an absurd scene. She makes herself 6 milliliters of tea, goes to sip it instantly without letting it steep at all, sees that it's her high school mug, freaks out, and just chucks it all over the floor. The mug jump scared you? I feel so bad for this teacher. She needs help. Going for the old water and the electronics, hey? Tried and true favorite of the Reaper. How much vodka did she pour into her mug that it created this giant trail across her entire house? She was fully prepared to just have a casual liter of vodka. And then just as a final fuck you... This poor woman got triple murdered. Yeah, this is fine. You'll get through it. Just kidding. Quadruple murdered. Great work, Alex. Add your fingerprints and DNA all over the scene.
Hey, Alex.
I love how Sean William Scott's reaction to seeing his classmate jump out of the teacher's house as it explodes behind him is just... Dude. There he carries on with a casual little bike ride for funsies. Now they obviously all do believe Alex, except for the FBI, who definitely thinks he's a serial killer. This is an interesting direction for things to go. That Carter now is starting to wonder whether or not he has any control over his destiny, but I do love that they're starting to make assumptions of how it works. You guys are all just guessing based off the word of some careless mortician who was fine with you guys breaking in at night. Maybe he was just trolling you since you broke into his place of employment. But it did kind of make it seem like he found a loophole. That if you try to die out of turn, then you're temporarily invincible. Maybe he's a genius. Good reason to never buy a 2-door car, I guess. I kind of love that he does decide that he doesn't actually want to die in this moment, despite just personally contriving a situation where he's almost guaranteed to die. Like, obviously he should be able to just move the car or get out of the door, but all of a sudden none of those are actually an option. It's really tense while we're here watching, trying to remember the order of characters' deaths from that opening scene.
We don't need this shit right now. I don't need it ever.
I don't need it ever. That's such an amazing sentiment. Good point. Why would you ever want to be surrounded with this bullshit? Billy's death is so sudden and gruesome. I think Carter absolutely pissed his pants, but Alex is really starting to lose his mind a little bit, going on about changing the design. He really needs to calm down before the FBI catch up with him, or they are for sure putting him away. Amazing how quickly you can be desensitized. Barely even reacting to Billy dying. Don't worry, Sean. I've reacted. I'll miss ya. The lunacy of corking these loose nails and duct taping every rickety counter and pointy surface. I kind of love that as an end point for these characters. They think they've unlocked the code and have this secret to escaping death. And apparently all it takes is making sure there's no nails to prick your finger on. You can start a fire, but it has to be in a bowl of water. Gloves at all times. You'll never see your family or friends again, and you'll live the life of a, I don't know, cat food eating weirdo. But the Grim Reaper can suck it because you're gonna live forever. Watching him eat this disgusting canned food in the most haggard room I've ever seen, looking like an absolute lunatic. Is it weirdly similar to Charlie Kelly and Frank Reynolds in It's Always Sunny?
I'm not an idiot. There's a reason to do the things that
Careful, man. If that trash blows over, who knows what'll happen. I absolutely love the absurdity of the ways the Grim Reaper has to start intricately making things ram into each other and create these catastrophe scenarios. Alex is too sharp for ya.
Tetanus. Nice one.
He's calling the Grim Reaper a fuck because he thinks he tried to give him tetanus. I did not remember this character so utterly and completely losing his mind, and it kind of makes sense, and I kind of love it. He claims to have made this cabin completely Reaper safe, yet it still looks like a chaotic shithole where literally anything could go wrong at any time. It's funny that it seems like the Reaper can blast this clothesline with lightning and like create a downed power line or any such crazy ways of potentially killing someone. I mean, couldn't he just strike them with a bolt of lightning then? He likes to have more fun than that, I guess. Alex might only be so-so at outsmarting death, but canoeing away from the FBI was a legitimately good plan. Like, what is the deal with this spinning death trap? How did that even truly happen? Alex canoed across the lake faster than the FBI could drive around it? That guy's got a hell of a pair of rowing arms. This is by far the most confusing way in which Death has attempted to kill anyone. I don't think this puddle of water on the ground from the pool is going to conduct that much electricity, but I guess I don't know enough about it to disprove it. Alex nearly impales his face on this downed log, nearly gets crushed by a tree, nearly drowns. Maybe Death is just sick of it, he's hedging his bets. Nuts to these characters, I'm gonna kill them both at the same time. Or he just has so much faith in himself that his clear kill is gonna go well. You can do it, Spider-Man! So many of these attempted kills are electricity related. It kind of tells me that the writers of this movie had an interesting concept of trying to outsmart Death and try to avoid these disastrous scenarios. But when they thought of how a gust of wind could potentially ever kill somebody, what they largely came up with was water and electricity. And you know, if all else fails, fire. I think there are more fun ways they could have played around with this, that if they really had got Death's number and outsmarted him, then Alex feels he can confidently do this insane plan of trying to knock off a down power line with a shovel because he knows he shouldn't die right now. I think that's what this moment is meant to be. I would have loved to have seen it take further advantage of that. But then I kind of like the little games that you start playing with Death where he accidentally lights the fire and he himself starts to play into Death's plan. So I think it's kind of a great final payoff of this movie. It's been a while since I've seen any of these. I hope they take better advantage of that in future installments. The fact that Alex didn't die from grabbing that power line maybe makes me think there is that weird superhuman situation where he was temporarily technically unkillable. The Grim Reaper is quite the type A, being that insistent on doing things in such a particular order. After all that, would you want desperately to go to Paris? To, you know, honor everyone you've lost? Or to never set foot in that country ever, no matter what? In this moment, these characters think that they've beaten Death's design? And what, they all think they get to live to be 200 years old now?
All right, and then it was clear.
He definitely called her clear. That's the first time in this movie, at the very end of the movie, that I had any confidence in that. Alex is the jumpiest man of all time, clearly having an episode. And everyone's like, oh, take care. And they are way too cool with joking about this amongst each other. Ideally, you just like never speak of it again. The final death is so dramatic and so awesome. There's also 180 on the sign there, which makes me think there was probably 180 sprinkled throughout this entire movie, and I just didn't notice most of them. The movie is fun and silly. It's over the top. It's enjoyable. Coming back to it, I do still quite like it, but it kind of has some pacing issues. It both rips through things, constantly needing to explain these weird rules, but also has so many scenes that kind of completely break up the flow of the movie. There is an okay variety of deaths in the movie. I can make fun of it relying on water and electricity a lot, but they did their best to switch it up. Keep in mind, they made this movie for like $23 million around a turn of CGI. They would have had to have done so much of this near practically, so I want to give it a bit of a pass on that. There's an unfortunate thing in this movie where most characters mumble or slur their words like crazy. I think maybe you could have done one or two more takes. That's probably because it was like an indie low budget throw together thing. But I still love the concept. They literally made a slasher movie without an actual slasher antagonist. And that's so cool. It's not the most sophisticated horror movie out there. It's not prestige. I did get one jump scare, so I guess it kind of qualifies as horror. But it's more about those crazy set pieces and dramatic deaths. People, I think, are going to be split a little bit on the way that things are presented. There's so much foreshadowing that it can kind of undercut the suspense. You know a death is coming, maybe you don't exactly know how, but then the way they start playing around with it, that's where a lot of the fun and enjoyment comes from. I still decently enjoy the movie. Maybe it doesn't hold up quite as well as I hoped it would, but it's an alright start to the franchise. I have no confidence in my ability to really rate these movies individually. I'm gonna try to give them each a score out of 5, and then at the end of the video I'll have a ranking through that. But what do you really give a movie like this? Do I go off of actual movie quality? Do I try and weigh in all the different effects, like the limitations they were probably working off of? Do I give this movie bonus points for a strong concept? Do I weigh that against future movies because then they are repeating the concept? It becomes messy really quickly, and so I'm kind of going off of just this general, like, 1 to 10, how much did I enjoy it, / how much do I recommend it? It's also tough because I'm so nostalgic for this franchise. A 5 out of 10 maybe feels a little generous, but I will give this one a 5, and that kind of becomes a little bit of a reference point for the rest of things. I like this movie, I like a lot of what it had to offer. I have to acknowledge it's not that good. 5 feels appropriate. Moving on to Final Destination 2, dated back to 2003. It's a 1-year anniversary following the events of the first movie. I am actually so excited for this one. Every time I think of the Final Destination franchise, I think of this movie. It was always in rotation on TV, and I tuned in to watch it like as often as possible. I loved this movie growing up. We have a similar spooky opening sequence, just a bunch of weird imagery that establishes the cast of this movie, but I don't know if it really informs a lot of what's about to happen. There you go, tease of a road trip going on. And in the background on the TV, it's establishing that some people out there believe there was something supernatural or some conspiracy surrounding all the deaths of the first movie. So other people are aware of this whole deaths plan thing. We get to fast forward through that. It's something this movie benefits from immediately. The last movie got so bogged down trying to inform us of all these weird, intricate rules of death's plan. This movie can get right into things. I kind of love how this guy on the TV is the whack job. The person interviewing him is like making fun of him and telling him he's insane, yet for some reason had him on his show. That's just good TV. This is actually a all-new director known for directing other classics like Homeward Bound 2, Lost in San Francisco, and Snakes on a Plane. At least the dad in this movie doesn't have that weird threatening aura. These kids are awful. They just are laughing at this poor homeless woman. Does this movie want me to root for them to die? Wear your damn seatbelt. I love the goofy teases and subliminal messaging. I mean, I guess it's fairly liminal. The kids on the school bus are chanting "Pile Up," "Highway to Hell" comes up on the radio. This is all within like 5 minutes of the movie starting. I think this movie kind of embraces the fact that it's a non-slasher movie. You know, we're 5 minutes into the movie and we already have someone flashing. If I remember correctly, there's a little bit of gratuitous nudity going on in this movie. This movie single-handedly ruined highway driving for me. Anytime I get stuck behind one of these big logging trucks, I just assume I'm going to die. There you go, about time. All it took was witnessing a drunk driver to remember to put your seatbelt on. Jesus, kid, what's wrong with you? The Grim Reaper works in mysterious ways. I kind of like the micro ways it's introducing us to these characters just based on the cars they drive and how they drive them. We have a pregnant woman in her mom van, this dirtbag wiping his nose in his convertible, someone racing through traffic on a motorcycle, a literal police officer. There is just no time wasted here. That is one of the major things this movie has going for it, along with being the most amazing car crash scene possibly ever filmed. Like, this shit is brutal. That car just flipped like 720 times, I counted. Not degrees, times. Yeah, Kimberly, bet you wish you pulled over to check on your car now. Every car blows up so spectacularly. No one just crashes simply. This car flipping over where they have like rag dolls flying out of the windows and stuff is pretty sickening. These movies really like having characters burn alive during the big death sequences. And of course, it didn't actually happen. Your friends are still dickheads, though. I think it's really interesting that it ties in a group of strangers this time with her tying up traffic. And you can literally see the lineup of the cars we just spent a few minutes, you know, quote, getting to know. My god, the physical comedy of this guy trying to hide doing drugs is already spectacular. This cop should probably ask her to get her vehicle out of the way and allow everyone behind her to advance forward.
Pull over!
Yeah, that guy's got the right idea. That's a reasonable request. Great police officering. 180, ooh! Oh fuck, I did not remember that all of her friends still died. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry for you and everything, but I kinda wanted to see more of your stupid pothead friend. He was pretty funny. The police officer is aware of the 180, as seemingly everyone is. I don't know geographically how near these two events were to one another. And he even knows offhand that her name is Clear Rivers. I guess it's a hard name to forget. Equally as hard as it is to get right. It's funny that the police brought in all these people. Now, there's approximately one death scene that I remember how it plays out. I generally remember there being more variety than everyone getting shocked to death, though. So I'm hopeful for things to be a little more interesting in that regard. Is this guy cooking fish sticks in a pan? You have an oven, dude. Are you a psychopath? The number of different things this sets up is kind of amazing. It makes sure to pay equal attention to every goofy thing. He throws spaghetti out the window. The fridge magnet falls into his leftovers. He's lighting a stove with way too much oil in the pan. He shoves his fist down into a garbage disposal. The number of things that he's trying to kill himself with here unintentionally is just astronomical. His microwave is blowing up, he's burning his apartment down, his arm is about to get shredded to bits, like nothing is going right. He manages to get his arm free, he doesn't destroy his hand through that. A totally bunk fire extinguisher. His cheap ass apartment windows get stuck. Climbs his way out the broken window, down the fire escape. Massive explosion. Sketchy ladder that won't quite cooperate.
Shit, I'm lucky.
Makes sure to comment on his luck, and the thing that does him in is the spaghetti he threw out the window. Guess you shouldn't have littered, dickhead. And they still squeeze in one more fake out. That individual death scene takes about 5 minutes to play out. A half hour into the first movie, things were basically just starting. A half hour into this movie, they've already avoided the insanely huge pileup, and one character has had an overly brutal death. Just the pacing of this movie is so much better. Alex apparently died at 19 in Edinburgh. All they say is he was the victim of an apparent freak accident involving a falling brick. The main character is killed off screen with basically no explanation. I love that this cop Googles premonition. He's on the case. I don't really watch the news. Did they usually report things in such grim detail? Oh, another news. This guy fucking died. Would you believe it? He got impaled by a ladder. Sure does suck. I love that having this kid read Stephen King is some sort of cheat code to establish the horror elements. Grabby death hands. He's gonna get ya. The tickle monster. So Clear checked herself into an institute after Alex died.
But my friends died last in my premonition, not first.
What do you think of that? Clear? Not very clear at all, is it? The rules have changed. I don't know why she expected that Clear would help or that she owes her anything. She helped you by explaining things or agreeing to see you at all. Isn't it very clear that the word clear's ruined. Isn't it clear that she lost in this scenario? Her life is ruined even though she survived. Why do you want advice from her? Ah, yes, smart. Bring everyone together into one room where death can kill you all together. How is that a subtle sign? Highway to Hell coming on the radio? I get that. You think you see pigeons in a window and that means someone's gonna get killed by pigeons? That's not subtlety. Ah, good old water and electricity. The #1 way to kill everyone. At least it actually looks like water this time. I do like, though, that this movie sets up so many possible things, like Death is really hedging his bets. That's far more interesting than just, there's some water and there's some electricity, you're gonna die. That actually caught me off guard so much. While he's also getting intensely dosed with laughing gas. That is like an infinitely more interesting way to die. He barely gets saved, but he really walks off that laughing gas awfully quickly. That is the most brutal death, oh god. Oh, the individual deaths in the first movie are kind of like, oh, okay, so I guess they're dead. Each one of these makes me just kind of like scrunch up into a singularity, like they just are so visceral. Should have never messed with those pigeons, man. Maybe some people will dislike the way that it keeps you guessing of what the next death is gonna be, only for it to be something you probably never could have predicted. But I think that's hilarious. It's not a mystery I care to solve. I would much rather be surprised by it all. Oh snap, Clear's here to help. I don't know how anyone's expected to know what's going on without a horribly sinister mortician explaining everything to them. It was absolutely necessary that this character be brought back. He's like laughing about a dead body. He's creepier than he was the first time. Although from a storytelling perspective, especially Clear's, it does make a lot of sense that they would come back to this guy. Like, why did he have all the answers in the first movie? It's a pretty good payoff. I kind of feel like having Tony Todd in a horror movie is just kind of a fun little reference to have. I'm aware of the Candyman series, but have never actually seen any of them. Maybe that's a series I'll have to bust out one of these Halloweens. It's a little strange that in this movie, she starts seeing other mini premonitions, not just signs. That kind of weirdly goes against the established rules. I love that they explain that the pregnant lady giving birth would save them all, and the cop is just like, it sounds like you guys are making things up. This guy is so bland in this movie in a way that makes me think they just went to the local precinct, yanked a cop out of there, and put him in this movie. He's not a bad actor, he's just so plain and forgettable. I had to look up what else this Jonathan Cherry is in, and he's in Goon, which is an outstanding comedy and more Sean William Scott. I think this guy is hilarious, and randomly in the middle of this horror series retrospective, I'm gonna suggest you guys watch Goon. I don't know how Clear is walking around helping them all without repeatedly having attempts made on her life. Death really just loves to take their shot, don't they? You dropped one thing, you're gonna get a canoe to the face. Ah yeah, the closet filled with sharp objects. Don't mind me just getting rid of all my spare hands. Him calling her just to say a man with hooks is gonna kill her is just bound to cause panic. Why would he approach it in that way? Oh god, the claws into the elevator door there is insane. Oh god, why does it keep trying? Oh, I'm telling you, man, the deaths in this movie are just messed up. They make them so gross. If you believe in Death's plan now, Eugene? Yeah, calling the Grim Reaper a cocksucker is pretty amazing. And grabbing a gun is not a good way to stop death, man. The degree to which every character melts down and breaks down and wigs out at various points in this movie is just incredible. These seem like potentially overreactions, but what else are you supposed to think at this stage? The rule of someone giving birth is insane and came out of nowhere, but it at least gives the characters something to cling on to and work towards, rather than just constantly trying to not die. Most movies are about characters just constantly trying to not die. That's just life, man. It's revealed that every character has had very narrow near-death experiences. And also they quietly drop that the cop is gay. I don't know if they ever pay any more attention to that. Everyone here also has a connection to someone from Flight 180. So it's not just that these characters should have died in the big pileup, apparently they should have died like at various points throughout their lives. It seems like maybe it over-convolutes the idea of death's design. Somehow, in many, many millennia of death killing people, this one premonition, this one time for an airplane, specifically set into motion this ripple of events that cascades towards many other people. And so death is just out here killing like hundreds of people trying to tie up all of this. It's kind of funny in a way that it makes death look panicky and reactionary, but it also means the rules of this are just kind of insane. And the more they try to explain it, the more off the rails it gets. I think the near-death moments in this movie are maybe better than the actual deaths. It gives you this tight moment of, oh, this is it! Only for not really anything to happen, only for someone to die very suddenly and unexpectedly a moment later. Poor Eugene, man, this guy's having a time. What exactly do they want this kid to do? Pull the tree out of the door? That is not something a human is going to do, let alone this little kid. This little redneck kid is super likable. The way gas from a different vehicle starts leaking and gets piped into the original vehicle is the shit I love to see in these movies. This character has a pretty touching moment where he realizes that he's potentially screwed up his entire life, and that if he's to die next, he wants this main character to throw out all his drugs and everything that would, quote, break his mom's heart. I feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity in this movie, or series at large, to have more moments of character growth and development like that. These people are dealing with crazy circumstances. They probably should be reevaluating everything. God, this pipe is so long. This gas has to travel a kilometer just to get to the car. Oh, God, that just startled the shit out of me. How did you not see that coming, dude? You just kind of assume that the leaking gas is going to be what does her in, especially since that young kid specifically addressed it a moment sooner. This is the moment that has stood out in my brain all these years. Oh, it's disgusting and so unexpected and so unique. And it was probably the first time in my life I saw the trope of someone getting cut into bits only to fall apart a few seconds later. That was like very new to me at the time. This movie does reach this crescendo where there's just no breaks. Characters are dying once every like 5 minutes in the most unexpected ways. Some of the acting in this is still a little inconsistent. The main girl, Kimberly, kinda stands out in a negative way. She was really good in that opening scene explaining the fact that she just witnessed this car crash, and then it's kinda downhill from there. I kinda wish Eugene was in more of the movie. His skepticism and off-the-walls energy kinda makes him this wild card character, and it just adds a lot to many of the scenes. Aw, twist, Isabella was never meant to die. Major fake out with Eugene, only to then kill him and Clear in one massive explosion. Not the most creative death, but the fact that they layered in 2 deaths and had all the will they die, won't they die is still kind of fun. It's a bit of a running theme in these movies that people do not react dramatically enough to deaths. You just witness the most messed up shit you've ever seen and your reaction is, oh no. I realize you gotta be like on your toes to outsmart death, but they have not established that that's what her character is. It kind of made sense because Clear was so intense. She got shit done. Kimberly's floating through this and kind of exists only to provide these premonitions. It's not a great character. I don't really know why they made her the lead. Maybe that's the fault of the director more than anything, since none of the characters are given that much attention, which is such a shame because of the way they were beautifully set up in that opening scene driving down the highway. But then it turns out that was literally all we had to go off of. It was not really expanded on beyond those original tropes of the mom, the drug user, the intense workaholic business lady. They could have taken that so much further. Nowadays, prestige horror is like this whole category and genre unto its own. Having a movie that's so unpretentious with its horror and treats these individual deaths just as these gags and crazy set pieces is so twisted. It makes for some great late night television and is the embodiment of the concept of a popcorn flick. The cheesy moment at the end with the harps and the light when they officially have beaten death. She's drowned and revived. Life beats death, whatever the fuck Candyman said. All wrapped up in a neat little bow. I'm sure there will be no further twists to come. Apparently, they now all hang out with this family. This weirdly establishes that literally every near-death experience is part of Death's plan and not just these ones with the premonition sequences. I don't really know why they felt the need to tack that on. But it's just a very weird thing for a group of death buddies who showed up on these people's farm, numerous of them die, and you just become friends with these people and hang out and attend their backyard barbecues? I don't know, man. I've never been in this situation. Maybe that's totally normal. This is taking notably longer to put together than I thought it would. I'll just record my thoughts as I watch a movie and then boom, there you go. Then I always felt like I had more to say after finishing the movie and I'm just talking over the credits and that's dumb, so I'm basically re-recording my immediate thoughts. I distilled that down. Trust me, this is actually somehow easier re-recording it rather than splicing together little micro sections of its footage. Whatever, editing on YouTube's tough sometimes. While this franchise at large is based on the shock value style sudden deaths, it wasn't really that way in the first movie. I would say the teacher with the knives in her kitchen, that was the closest we got. I guess the guy strangling in his bathroom was pretty shocking as well. But it was only really just touching on that. It really comes in full force here. This movie is really capitalizing on the fact that people are typically quite squeamish, and they want to make the deaths as twisted and unexpected as they can to get those reactions out of you. That's essentially the premise of this franchise. It came out a little ahead of movies like Hostel, which is this gore horror porn that I've never been into. Those movies revel in how much they make you want to throw up. Maybe less than something like Human Centipede, but they're purposely disgusting. I like the way this series has so far threaded that line of campy horror fun. I can't really name other movies that feel like this. And maybe that's part of why this movie has stood out in my mind for so long, and is specifically entirely the reason why I've wanted to revisit these 5 movies. Although now, at this point, coming back to things and being able to re-record some of these thoughts a little bit, in the process of watching these movies, I came to realize I had seen the first 2 on my own on late night TV and really enjoyed them. At some point, I learned that someone I knew this franchise and liked it. So we all got together, we watched the 3rd movie together, which I specifically remember because of the sunbathing scene. We'll get to that. I remember thinking oh, we're all watching nudity together, we're gonna get caught. I definitely hadn't seen the 4th movie, and then I had seen the 5th one once. So yeah, Final Destination 2, the notably better movie of the 2. If they never get worse than the first movie, then the franchise will be in pretty good shape. Even though that first movie is pretty humdrum, okay. But the second movie really has me excited for the larger potential. I want to see where this goes with the 3rd movie. I was curious what critics had to say about this movie, and I saw a quote. The sequel is little more than an excuse to stage elaborate, gory scenes of characters getting killed off. Yeah, dude, just precisely what these movies are. Who is this snob who thought that they were signing up to see anything other than that? Well, I think the movie could be elevated by giving it a little more depth than it currently has. It's enough of a reason for the movie to exist for me. Apparently, critic Nick Hyman put this on a list, 15 movies the critics got wrong. Good job, Nick. Reading the opinions of some other critics, they're disgusted that this movie exists at all. How could people possibly conceive of a movie that exists solely to have random gory on-screen deaths? I don't know, man. Not every movie needs to be Oscar-worthy. And if people were to think of this as more of a horror comedy, rather than anything that's meant to have any sort of direct layered depth, then you're kind of watching the wrong franchise. But how could anyone see this goofy, poor little farm boy get blown up by a barbecue with his arm landing in front of his mom and not realize that this movie was never meant to be taken that seriously? There is so much to like about this movie. For me, it's like an 8 out of 10. I want to give it higher, but I have to acknowledge its shortcomings. So next up we have Final Destination 3 from 2006 that actually brings back the director from the first movie. But now for some reason this third movie is entirely a standalone that has nothing to do continuing forward the story of the first two. So for what reason they would bring back that original director, while not including the franchise creator and co-writer of the first two movies, is a particularly strange choice. These opening sequences are getting more elaborate. I like that that's become a staple of this franchise. And there's something really fun and playful about having screams layered in, coming from the amusement park rides themselves, rather than this disconnected thing that's just kind of layered into the scene. Apparently they did it this way because they didn't want the characters to be bogged down in thinking through the ways that all the weird layered new rules they added in the first two movies stacked up. So for me, watching these three movies back to back, that's a little bit strange to suddenly be in a position where no one knows anything. I am thrilled that Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the lead on this movie. This is super early in her career. I feel like I only really would have known her by name around the time Scott Pilgrim came out. This is a fun payoff for me to come back and see who might be one of my favorite actresses. Looking through the cast, I recognized the name Dustin Milligan. I had to double check who Marcus was. Looking at this picture did nothing for me, did not remotely recognize them. I was stunned to realize this was a 20-year-old Ted from Schitt's Creek. It's just fun to see that guy show up in something else from so long ago. Characters commenting, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Like, it's so on the nose, it's just amazing. I love the way they just show something innocent like a balloon popping that was meant to pop, but layer in the spooky music to make it ominous. It makes me think they could make the opening parts of these movies literally anything. Any random sequence of events, layer in that music, and oh, it's gonna be something big. It's a little overused, maybe a little indiscriminate. Whatever, these are just meant to be stupid good fun anyways. The over-the-topness that the roller coaster is literally themed after the devil and hell is a positive to me. It's a sign that they're leaning into the absurdity of this franchise. Which is funny, I feel like that's something that was really developed in the second movie and not really present in this director's first movie. So I'm glad to see they've grown and are embracing the new direction the series has taken. I do love that they brought Tony Todd back yet again, but this time specifically just had him voicing the devil rather than playing this weird mortician yet again. That character was kind of stupid the first time and redundant the second time. I guess I appreciate that they took the time to pay it off and bring him back at all, but I don't really think I need to see the actual mortician again. I mean, there's 1,000 different little hints that something bad is about to happen, but I appreciated in the second movie when there was a level of subtlety. The characters chanting "pile up" is quite literal, but at the same time it only really feels like a tease until after the payoff. At least for the characters, we know what's coming. But this roller coaster telling you you're going to die, and then a sign saying you'll never come back, and then showing the roller coaster being rickety, just a little bit more on the nose than I want. I don't really know why this guy gets his buddy to sit in the back with his girlfriend. Bit of a dick move, but they don't really present it like that's the case. It's like totally normal that he doesn't want to sit with his girlfriend while she's scared. Oh, he touched the gum. He's for sure gonna die. I personally hate roller coasters, not because of this movie. It's just something I truly and strongly don't enjoy at all. I kind of dislike all amusement park rides, but roller coasters in particular just kinda do me in. I don't remember exactly how this plays out, but it's hard to imagine how everyone in a roller coaster could die in some way that is staggered the way the car crash was and not just one big explosion like the plane. There's actually a really great moment in this scene where everyone goes from screaming like, ooh, ah, scary to legitimately terrified, and I think that's played off very well. It's so immediately clear that having a strong lead actress is going to dramatically affect the quality of this movie. Several cars derail. This guy just gets winged around during the loops, but somehow doesn't die until a stray piece bashes into him and totally wrecks this guy. Now the roller coaster is even more broken than it already was. It pauses at the top, leaving everyone dangling. I'm a little surprised at no point does it react to people watching this insane wreck. He just gets cut in half by I didn't even know what. And in maybe like the worst CGI moment of the sequence, she gets bucked off in her own way. There's a funny moment here that she was already actively scared, so no one is reading into the fact that she is wigging out, you know, at first. There's one guy like demanding to be let off, and for whatever reason they don't do it, and they don't even bother filling up the rest of the cart before they run this ride. Like, this was a pretty major disturbance. I think you guys could have held things up for a couple minutes to figure it out. The security guard is the least consoling guy of all time. I realize she's being hysterical, but you know, try to use a little bit of a deft hand. In the first movie, everyone was high school students, but the way they were characterized was basically teenager, teacher, I don't know, jock, teenager. This movie set in high school leans into those tropes a lot harder. There's the jock, the jock's friend, there's the popular kids, basically the plastics from Mean Girls, the emo couple. Kevin gives this ridiculous exposition dump where he summarizes the entire first movie, and she understandably tells him to fuck off. It's very immediately clear that Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the best actor or actress to come through this franchise so far. Probably someone saw Sky High and just realized her breakout potential, right? Why is it a trope for these, like, rich girls to always be chugging back big gulps? Is it just meant to be vaguely suggestive? Or is obnoxiously sipping on a cup of soda the actual trope? That they're such a self-involved person, they don't realize how annoying they're being? I don't think I've ever seen a girl like this in real life who's drinking like an entire liter of cola.
I want a goddamn liter of cola. Liter is French for give me some fucking cola.
This is a really well executed aspect of this movie. I mean, it's literally hilarious seeing them use their busted cheap digital camera that every high schooler owned prior to the days of smartphones. But the way that balloon popping and things like that felt like underwhelming teases, it's really cool that the photos she was taking were secretly the teases the entire time. It's only that later in the movie do we actually get to see that paid off. The tanning bed death is literally the only one from this movie I can remember offhand. I can't rule out the distinct possibility that I was sneakily watching this with my friends when we were like 14 years old, and that we felt like we were really getting away with something by watching this scene that had some boobies in it. Each photo carries a subtle little hint of how those characters will die, and I think that's so much more interesting than the character having continuous flashes of these mini premonitions. The way the shelf falls into place to lock these two shut is absurd, but I'm into it. The more complex the series of exact coincidental circumstances that have to play out to make one of these deaths happen, the better. Having these characters literally burn to death while they're getting showered with shards of glass is a really terrible way to go. It's maybe not as visceral as some of the other ones, but it might be among the most horrifying. And it just keeps going. Oh God. The conclusion that Frankie Cheeks comes to here is very funny. He thinks he's having some sort of epiphany about objectifying women, but he's still doing it in this self-centered, misogynistic way. It makes this very obnoxious character quite funny. Because of the fact that they reset things, I do think this movie is dragging a little bit. We're about 40 minutes in, we've had the big setup and our first major death, and they're clearly trying to pay some attention to these characters, giving them moments to react to the insanity of the death, or deaths. I really like McKinley, going on a bit of a rant at a funeral. He's clearly messed up from all this, as you might expect. But now this is all confusing. Kevin is specifically the one who told her about Flight 180, but then when she goes and does her own research, he suddenly starts to think that, oh, maybe I shouldn't have told you about it? That's all a bunch of baloney, don't believe it? Where's that coming from? The picture hint system is interesting because it indicates there's only one way these characters would or could be killed. It's not just a matter of the order they were going to die in, and then keeping an eye out for specific signs in the moment. There's a little bit more of this predestination thing going on, where the specifics of how they were killed seemingly can't change. I like the picture thing. It's like a fun little bit of mystery. I had to laugh at the fact that a drink responsibly van drives in the background here, identical to the one scene in the second movie. But yeah, the change of the rules here is kind of what throws me off. Oh, you're losing control. This is a really solid sequence. It started setting things up so far ahead of time, and it really makes it seem like Wendy and Kevin are the targets of this one, even though we know that would be out of order. Oh, that really just, I knew that that's who was in the car. I knew that they were about to die, but that was just made so much worse than I thought it was going to be. I think Ryan Merriman is pretty strong in this movie as well. So hinging this movie on two relatively strong actors goes a long way, even if I think at this point the pacing is a little off. This guy was apparently planning to get married after graduation. I don't know if people view that as like a romantic thing. Maybe if you were also 18 years old watching this movie. I'm pushing 30, so I look back at that and just think, nah dude, bad idea. There's a weird aspect to this movie where at this stage numerous people have died and these are the only two characters who understand what is going on, or at least think that they do. I understand with two strong leads, they really wanted to lean on them and put a lot of focus on these characters, develop them a little further, see precisely how they react. But the fact that we're missing that group aspect of we're all in it together, seeing everyone's reaction to this news, and watching them play off each other is something this movie's missing.
I mean, there's nothing like up my ass or anything.
I love the gag that he thinks he's gonna die from something getting shoved up his ass. There are not many jokes, but I think it only works really having seen 3 of these movies. Electronics and water, classic. I actually hope this movie genuinely recognizes that they've overused that and treat it as a trope and something to be mocked. Try to subvert it a little bit. The insane way they're overplaying the testosterone in this room is hilarious. Like here we get an individual character being introduced to the idea of maybe death is out to get them. That means numerous characters were never introduced to the concept, and the more we introduce it to one character at a time, the more time we have to waste over explaining this concept. That might be the first time the characters legitimately killed themselves in a way that is the fault of death technically. At least for once, these characters actually react to everyone around them dying. Each new death that happens, they kind of have to reevaluate and stew in the fact that this is horrifying and messed up. At this stage, there's a level of predictability here. Because no one really knows the rules, we're not having the whole intervention thing. Entirely at this point, we've known the order characters are meant to die, and then they die in that order. Frankie was almost a surprise. But if we grouped these characters together with no real knowledge of who is supposed to die next, and made sure that each death was as insane and unpredictable as possible, it might make things notably more interesting. There's like a really serious disconnect happening between these different scenes. The New York Times described it better than I think I ever could. This movie is lacking the novelty of the first or the panache of the second. That really does carry the first movie because it's only so-so. But yeah, panache. That second movie really has that extra little something, that spice that makes it extra nice. What is this night shift at the warehouse tool shop that this guy's working? He's seemingly just doing such a random sequence of menial tasks at like midnight? Between every death, these characters have to go and track down one individual person, get them up to speed, and then at some point we know the death is going to be teased and built up to. So there's these small little breaths given where we get to see the main characters, Wendy and Kevin, deal with the trauma on a surface level, nothing deep. And then the next death happens, rinse and repeat. There's just nothing really surprising in this movie. I do think there's a little bit more humor sprinkled into the movie, and that mostly works through these characters. That was something done really well with Jonathan Cherry's character in the second film, and there's some humor to the deaths themselves. So I will say the overall tone of this movie does work quite well. That builds off the way that was balanced in the second film in a way that's beneficial to this third installment, but it doesn't quite all coalesce. Having a nihilistic character that has such a specific view on death and how it's all random and pointless is a good character to have in a movie like this. He maybe should have been present the entire time, feeding that energy and reacting to each death in subsequently escalating ways. I will say the deaths are potentially the most creative they've been. They still like to have little fake out moments, but those tend to be minor. I think it worked better in the second movie when there was like 30 different things going on and you had no idea where it was headed. I think at this stage of the movie, it's most well done at this death scene. There are 1,000 tiny little things that go into setting this one up. I didn't even gasp or anything at that death because it was too messed up. That is the reaction I've been looking for. That is weirdly not seen very often in these movies. There's only like 20 minutes left in this movie, and we finally have the skeptic won over, but now for some reason, Ian isn't even out here walking around with them. He was the guy who thinks death is random, didn't believe in any of this, and just had his girlfriend brutally murdered while barely narrowly being saved. What kind of weird writing decision is it to not pair him up with these other characters at this stage? This guy gives off such specific Shia LaBeouf energy. You know, back from like Transformers 1 era. They kind of look similar, but there's something about the nervous energy and line delivery that is so similar between the two. I respect the absurdity of the setups for the individual sequences in this film, but it is jarring the way we just kind of jump from one event to the other, and that these characters know they're on this list of people who will potentially die in absurd ways, so they decide to attend events or hang out in areas where there will be infinite ways in which they could be killed. It's been a while since I've been to live fireworks. Is it insane for people to clap for the entire duration of the display? That feels like too much. I would say this movie's generally quite well filmed. The action is usually super clear, and it creates some nice tension where you're really starting to see where this is all headed. Watching her get ripped around with a rope around her neck, dragged by a horse, is pretty shocking. Come on, Wendy, give her a second to recover before you start shouting at her about the roller coaster. The fact that these additional setups start paying off in this moment to start killing characters left and right creates for a really chaotic climax, but I don't know who that character is. That doesn't mean anything to me. This actor from McKinley is actually really good. He looks a little bit like Jared Leto. I bet he could have played a better Joker, honestly. I'm okay with Ian not being present after Aaron's big death scene, if the entire point is that it basically sent him down a villain arc. I think they could have leaned way harder into this like god complex he develops where he thinks he can't die. They play with that for about 4 seconds before they kill him. So it's just more kind of lost potential. Yet a third way they could have better managed this character is have him literally trying to kill Wendy. Earlier in the movie, he was talking about how she should probably kill herself to interrupt the sequence, disrupt God's plan, and save them all. He started to buy into this skeptic character, thinking he needs to kill her to save everyone? and they suddenly now have to outrun Death and Ian. That would have been an interesting new direction for the franchise. They could have set that up super early on. That could have been the entire movie. So there's some solid ideas. Mary Elizabeth Winstead carries this movie. The pacing is off. It's a little too formulaic, and despite being well filmed and a few solid deaths, it's just too glaringly obvious what this movie could have or should have been. I think because it gets going a little faster and doesn't spend nearly as much time on exposition as the first movie, it may still be better than that one, although it suffers from a new expository problem of re-explaining its premise to every single character they run into. I think it does fall firmly in the middle at this point. I have no idea why at this stage in the movie we did a time jump. Like, why did she manage to outrun Death for this amount of time? Her and Kevin? That makes no sense. Bringing Tony Todd's voice back yet again, and having everything on the subway be a tease or a sign is well done. But completely changing everything and cutting out Kevin's character at this stage, I don't follow it at all. Just why? They coincidentally all run into each other and aren't immediately weirded out by that? I mean, she understandably is, but he isn't? I think your guys' lives are kind of inseparable at this point. I don't know, I guess they don't know the full set of rules. They think they've won and escaped it, but they dedicated a lot of time to Wendy and Kevin specifically researching the events of the last two films, so they should understand that quite well. I guess we have the fun of having two major catastrophe sequences in one movie. Really leads to things being wrapped up in a tight little bow. It's a premonition all over again, but it's a little bit haunting, I guess. But it's kind of strange because we know that they can't do anything to stop this one, and it's such a strange tack on. Like, the movie was right in the middle of things, suddenly we jump forward and then pick back. Why? Why did we do it this way? What is the point of doing a time jump if then you abruptly end things? Like, that they really... There's a gap missing there, like that. There's no point. Or, like, if you're gonna make the time jump, you have to make it more meaningful somehow. There wasn't even really a reprieve in the middle. The characters just kind of had to tell us that things had been going well for all of them. Surely there were better ways to show that. It's a weird fizzle for this movie to end on. Yeah, I guess it's smart to kill everyone off at the end, but why couldn't we have had the big county fair kill most people? If not everyone, I don't know. I think I'm less forgiving of some of the things in this movie than I am with the first. Like, there should have been some lessons learned along the way of how to navigate this particular form of storytelling, how to really pay it all off satisfyingly. And it just kind of seems like they randomly decided to end the movie because they ran out of allotted time or maybe things to say or do. You can kind of just feel that they stopped caring at this point. I don't know, let's just jump ahead 5 months and then they all die in a subway. Sure, why not? That'll be explosive and elaborate enough for people to not notice that it's completely disjointed. Maybe there's just a sense throughout this whole movie that they didn't care that much about the story. The strong acting can trick you into thinking they cared about the story, but considering how pointless the moments are in between the big character deaths, it's really clear they just kind of slapped some ideas together. Still a relatively entertaining watch. It's visually of a higher quality than the first movie, and that really comes down to, I think, cinematography and things maybe being a bit better filmed, or just the quality of the cameras, things like that, because there's some pretty jank CGI that brings that back down again. It's also interesting to think that it's the same director as the first, so we're maybe potentially witnessing a little bit of their growth that shows what they were actually capable of, maybe with a bit more of a budget. But then this guy went on to direct Dragon Ball Evolution, and his career making movies basically ended. So yeah, James Wong, maybe not actually anything that special, not necessarily a name you should keep an eye out for. I'll say there is more good than bad here. I'm willing to say like a 6 out of 10. You could pretty easily dedicate a trilogy watch marathon here, you know? Like, these 3 movies together are decent enough. And who knows, maybe it'll appeal to you in the same way it did for me growing up, and then yeah, you're gonna have a blast watching these 3 movies. Now, an amazing thing about going to the fourth movie at this point is it's the return of the director from the second movie. So we have 4 movies and only 2 directors so far. If he is able to step things up, better balance the tone that he established in the second movie, pay better attention to the characters, but bank on the fact that this franchise is now more well known and maybe get some better actors in there, there's a lot of potential going into the fourth movie. So the possibilities feel really strong going in. Final Destination 4 coming out in 2009. It's fun to come back to it now, realizing this is the director returning from Final Destination 2. So that actually gives me a lot of hope. Also setting things up with a big raceway crash. How could you not like that? Playing off that sick idea that people literally only watch this sport to see crashes, considering that this entire franchise is about this sick fascination with death, it's pretty fitting. A binocular flask is sick. I want one of those. Although the only thing I do that needs binoculars is bird watching, so I guess I'm gonna go get drunk and look at birds? Honestly, that sounds like a great day. Why is this mom doing this to her poor children? We're establishing the asshole couple, the chivalrous cowboy, this group of friends, a couple of absolute dirtbags. It's funny seeing the way these movies try to introduce as many trope-based characters as possible, just clumping people together in these cliches. This movie keeps showing things like a crack in the bench or a crack in the beam above them, this oil tipping over. But that's just kind of showing that things aren't in great shape. It's not really that usual sort of on-the-nose hints at death, you know? These bolts coming undone, that's not quite the same as a bus full of people chanting or Highway to Hell playing on the radio. Although they are sitting in section 180, so there's that. There we go, that's the sort of thing I'm looking for. Thank you, trashy t-shirt guy. This whole thing's gonna happen because someone left a screwdriver in whatever the screwdriver hole there is? I don't know anything about racing. One thing is that because we've already done a literal car crash before, this has to live up to the car crash of Final Destination 2, which is so good. But also makes me realize that this director chose to do that specifically twice. Maybe he didn't choose, you know, someone else could have written it, I don't know. Oh god, people are just getting trampled and stuff? That's too real. Oh, don't worry, she didn't die, just kidding. I probably can't actually show most of these deaths. How in God's name is anyone expected to memorize the order people died in? I'm gonna have to assume that's not gonna be a part of this movie's plot. What is this catastrophe? Like 100 people are dead already. Things are just collapsing all over the place as cars continue to ram into them. Do you know things are so CG reliant in this movie that it actually looks crappier than the big deaths in the second movie? Oh, I forgot that one of the gimmicks with this movie was that it was 3D when it came out. So that's something I specifically remember, is that almost every death is this contrived reason to have something pop out of the screen at you. Usually people come out of these premonitions sweating and actively freaking out. This guy's like really calmly putting things together. Okay, now he's starting to wig out. It took him a while to get there. It's weirdly like the premonition didn't actually rattle him. There was actually surprisingly few car crashes during the giant car crash scene. It was mostly big slabs of concrete crushing people over and over. Poorly CGI'd slabs of concrete.
Concrete? That's concrete, baby. Concrete. Concrete.
Funk yeah, concrete.
Concrete.
No, they immediately just decided to kill someone 1 second later. Oh, I forgot this was the Final Destination. I kind of like that this opening sequence is referencing old deaths, considering how many of them were so absurd. That's fun for people who have actually bothered to watch all these movies. All 7 of us out there. There is some whiplash going from the third movie to this one and just instantly realizing the acting is not going to be up to par. I realize well-known actors aren't going to want to do this cheesy horror movie, and it's almost impossible for a casting director to find top-tier talent with every individual movie, but getting that main character right does kind of dictate a lot of how the movie's going to be. I think there's a news report on the TV explaining how amusement parks are dying out, and I wonder if that's because of a massive amount of people dying in the previous movie. So I think it's in the pro column that we have a group of friends immediately talking about this together, trying to sort out exactly the rules of this together. So I'm curious how they're going to learn the rules. It was McKinley Speedway. So we're throwing out a reference to the third movie. I like that.
People didn't have a Dr. Xavier with them to tell them to get out of the way.
Dr. Xavier? He doesn't see the future. What a poser. The family's out here, calling him a hero, saying he saved everyone's life. Oh, at least the redneck's accusing the security guard, not the main character. Although, really, he shouldn't accuse anyone. He also thinks the main character is a freak. So the redneck is embodying two common reactions at once. Look at this. An overly complex vision that throws as many things outward at the screen as possible.
What's wrong? I just had a really bad nightmare.
I just had a really bad nightmare. This is I'm sorry, man. This guy will not be able to carry this movie, that much is clear. So apparently this guy agreed to direct the movie after James Wong was unable to direct because of conflicts with Dragon Ball Evolution. Really got his priorities straight. But I'm also laughing at a comment I saw where this director agreed to do it because he liked the 3D gimmick, and he and one of the main producers agreed that they should use it to add depth to the film, and they said that unironically, instead of just, quote, something popping out at the audience every 4 minutes. I'd say so far they failed on that count. That's literally all they've used it for, because that's all 3D's good for. I hate 3D movies. So the redneck character got drunk here, and I think was planning to tow, like, the security guard's car or something. Okay, this movie is funny in ways that it shouldn't be. Oh, goodness, no, the acting is wall-to-wall bad.
You remember that redneck from the racetrack? He's dead.
What? Nick, get in here.
Is her friend still on the phone? She hasn't said anything to her in minutes. Maybe the 3D used in those visions is slightly better. That first death was seeming like a fun setup, and the payoff was great. But it was weirdly rushed. Like, I love when it takes that guy 5 minutes to escape from his apartment, all for it to go wrong anyways. This whole thing played out in like 30 seconds. Kids just throwing rocks at a sign for the hell of it? That's the most believable thing that's happened in this movie. I love that this guy just calls these kids stupid right in front of their mom's face. And she doesn't even say anything because she knows it's true.
Someone got killed on his block, dragged down the street on fire. Isn't that terrible?
That is a terrible synopsis of what happened to that man. Why would you assume anyone would remotely understand that sentence? Credit to this movie for not using water and electricity. Yet. But I'm not ruling it out. I can't wait for a rock to fly at my face, and then that ceiling fan to fly at my face, and then the scissors to fly at my face. Okay, the hairspray ending up in the flattening iron is pretty legit. Curious where that's going. Jeez, these kids are just a wreck. Hey, it didn't actually fly at my face. Unclear though why Death kind of missed his shot on that one. Usually it always works unless someone specifically intervenes. Here goes the rock. Oh, that's so sudden and pretty brutal. The irony of it is pretty funny that it was legitimately the kid's fault. Yeah, not really funny, haha.
Nick had a really strange dream.
Great. I'm glad I canceled my golf game for this. Good.
This guy's the best part of the movie. It's a funny line and delivery, despite the fact that I think you can hear this guy botch the line.
I'm glad I canceled my golf game for this. Good.
No, he's a bit of a dickhead, but I like the way this actor is pulling it off. So he doesn't remember who died in what order. That makes sense. Nick is babbling about how Death has their number and he's gonna start killing them in order unless someone intervenes. Like, where did he pull that information from? My least favorite part of these movies is where people have to relearn the rules. That's why number 2 worked so well. We had Clear there to kind of exposition things and speed it up. And I realize they're speeding through it again here, but it makes it into nonsense. So we get a vision with a random series of hints. Characters then talk about the vision that we just saw. Now the next scene will presumably be setting that up, then someone will die, characters will vaguely sort of react to that. For a franchise that suffers from being formulaic, this movie is presenting itself in this tight formula where it's like a rinse and repeat cycle every 10 to 15 minutes. It sucks to see the guy who set the bar for this franchise falling into this trap. making the movie feel so repetitive. It's even the same writer who wrote the second movie. I don't know why they lost touch with the franchise so dramatically. The security guard is letting them review the footage to try and figure out the order they died in. Why would he allow that? Every time these characters are separated in the franchise, they have to spend time tracking each other down, which is never as hard as it seems, and they have to try and get them up to speed, telling them they're about to die. And then they always make it there just in time to watch that character get killed. I think I'm repeating criticisms I had for the third movie, but the group who survives these catastrophes together needs to remain together so we don't need to repeat so often. I suppose this creates a circumstance where we can have different settings for all this to take place, whereas if they were in a group together, you would have to create reasons for them to go to a body shop, and that's kind of strange. But this is a horribly disjointed narrative. The fake out for that death was pretty great, even though I don't know if the actual death makes a ton of sense. But the setup, fake out, and eventual payoff all happen in the span of like 1 minute. Now they have to go find their next friend and re-explain again, and try to convince an entirely new person that these series of deaths are connected. Is it obvious that I'm frustrated with this movie? I'm pretty frustrated with this movie. I kind of wish I wasn't watching it. I'm not the one to walk out of a theater, but if I threw this on TV randomly, I probably would have tapped out at this point. Oh, the tease here is a car wash and some electricity. We're getting the classic water and electricity, maybe done a bit differently this time. Did anyone see this guy pop that kid's inflatable, push him in the pool, and steal his gun? He just throws the gun away. I mean, that's horrible. Like, that's more of just legitimate dickhead stuff rather than funny dickhead stuff. But just like, how did no one see it happen or care, I guess? She decided to go to the car wash before she figured out if her sunroof was fixed. Why did it zoom in on that sign for so long? Okay, I had to go back. Antenna down is a thing? Antennas go down on cars and some car washes require that? Maybe that's super common. I've just never experienced it and it just threw me off. So yeah, that's why no antenna, I guess. Because it might fly into the exposed circuit board. Something that for some reason exists immediately next to all of the water and cleaners. Not tucked away in a separate room where it won't ever get wet or have things flung into it. Of course not. For the record, I worked at a car wash for like 3 years. I guess that's kind of important information. That's why I'm being so critical and know-it-all-y about a car wash scene. The pipe breaks and it's just filling her water? She's gonna drown in a car wash. That's insane. This actress is actually going just believably buck wild. Here's where we're starting to get long-term payoffs. A while ago, this guy accidentally turned on the drain, drops his coin, goes after it, and gets himself sucked down into the drain? We have two characters simultaneously nearly drowning? What is even going on here anymore? This death is so drawn out and over the top that it's so far the standout of this movie. Like, so many things are going wrong for this woman, and it took so long to build up to. That's what I'm looking for in this franchise. This scene would be a little bit horrifying too if it didn't become a weird joke in a recent season of It's Always Sunny.
Oh, guys, I almost forgot. Do not go near the pool drains, no matter how good you might think they feel on your butt.
I didn't expect rewatching these movies to make me think of It's Always Sunny numerous times. No! My face is gonna be so clean! Would that have killed her? Aren't those just made out of, like, soft, spongy material? In what world did you think you would be saving her by smashing into the front end of her car? From your outside perspective, how could you possibly perceive what was going on? And how did the jolt of that not, like, decapitate her? Holy shit. This guy's holding his breath for a long, long time. And there's the irony, actually, that he turned on the drain himself. Oh, what the fuck? Oh my god, I think the drain just ripped out his insides. I don't know if that's how pool drains work, but I'm gonna have to assume it is forever now. I'll never swim again. This security guard, who we've never spent any time with at any point, is basically saying he's okay with dying. But this movie somehow has the least emotional stakes of any of these movies, and that's saying a lot, because basically none of them have emotional stakes. Ooh, we have a helpful gust of wind for a change. This is dark. Like, it's barely even humorous, but there's something to it. It makes me feel like Groundhog Day. This guy tried to kill himself at least 3 times and nothing worked. Oh, thank you. Nothing 3D had happened in a while. I appreciate that.
I'm just thankful that we have our whole lives ahead of us, yeah?
Oh, funny you should say that, main character. Shocking how you think you've just fully beat this all of a sudden. But the confidence is just through the roof. It's stunning, really. There is like 20 minutes left in this movie, and they're wrapping it up as if it's already the finale. Everything is resolved. Good for them. Psych, new vision. Ooh, the cowboy actually survived the big crash. But does that mean Death never meant to kill him? Or that he was technically rescued? Anyway, big old tub flooding with this racist grandpa's room. Which, I don't really know why they felt the need to include that comment. But we're setting up some classic water and electricity doom. You guys are just talking about destiny and killing yourselves and death and everything in this elevator full of people? No wonder everyone's giving you weird side eyes. But why would the writers include that scene and then not make more of an actual joke out of it? Looks like you guys got there just in time. Electricity not needed. That was weirdly sudden. Don't really know, no setup or anything on that one. Weird that they spent like 1 second trying to make us care about that character. The abrupt deaths can be fun, but it kind of minimizes things a little bit. It just makes me think like, well, why isn't Death just smacking buses into every one of these characters? People cross the street like 7 times a day. I like the idea of the characters being overly paranoid and being scared of mundane things like escalators. They should be leaning into that so hard. Having them try to live their lives while being scared of every step they take. Pump this movie full of like 100 fake outs that we don't see every next death coming so obviously. At least there's some other big thing being set up here that I can't quite foresee. This movie's really 50-50 on that sort of thing. So they actually went to a movie theater to watch a 3D movie. It's meta in a way that I don't enjoy because I hate 3D movies. There's an interesting thing going on here, though, where a different character is having a new premonition that's mimicking that original one. That's a cool premise. Small little things like asking this guy to move his feet or someone shouting down in front. That's the first sign of good writing I've seen in this movie. It's just interesting and well executed. She's spending an awful lot of time explaining how she thinks something is wrong, rather than not just immediately bailing. Theater 13, ooh. Strange that she was willing to die for this movie. I do think it's genuinely quite hilarious to have an actual explosion occur in a 3D movie featuring an explosion at that very moment. If this movie were a tiny bit funnier and a tiny bit more tongue-in-cheek, it would show one person in the audience like looking at their hand, like testing their depth perception with the glasses, being all like, oh, it feels so real. Maybe that's too silly for this movie, but I would have loved to see it. I don't know why this movie theater is also a gas factory. I know from Inglourious Bastards that film reel is very flammable, but like, what is happening up here? Oh, and now realizing that the escalator was a tease is actually kind of great. Oh, bro, I hate it. I hate seeing it, though. Don't show it. Is it necessary to make escalators out of complete death traps like that? Oh, the whole sequence was a whole new premonition. Okay, so that is new. Double premonitioning one of these movies. So in the third act here, a few new ideas are coming into play, and I give it some credit for that. He tries to find the source of the problem rather than just evacuating everyone. Well, that's quite useless. Maybe start shouting fire and, trying to get help. Like, don't just one-man this. Like, seriously, film reels is one thing. Why do they have 8,000 gallons of fuel and flammable things all piled together here? Look at what you've done. You've started a whole new chain of death possibilities. Careless. So careless. One stray tinder to start it all over again. Good thing someone left their oily rag on top of the pile of sawdust. Ooh, have nail guns suddenly become a trope of this franchise? And death is piling on water and electricity. Oh, it might be fuel. I think it's fuel for once. Yeah, definitely fuel. Hey, that's pretty smart, kid, just as long as one goddamn thing in this theater works properly. Somehow, despite completely changing everything, the explosion was about to happen at the same time? Throw a little bit of electricity in the mix here and you got yourself a nice convenient death. He's just gonna walk around giving out safety tips the rest of his life. This movie really just spent no time with the trauma of all this. Like, they did still lose a few friends along the way. And I don't know, they don't know the rules of this. They never spent the time researching it or figuring it out. They somehow just, like, came up with the theory on their own. I don't get it.
What if we didn't change anything? What if us being here right now is the plan from the beginning?
What if? Good question. That very final question there is almost smart and almost poignant. But, like, why wouldn't he have just killed you all at once at the racetrack then? But why? I don't know. I don't know if there's any more I could say about this movie that I didn't already say over the course of watching it. It wasn't very good. They just spend so little time on anything. Any plot, any character development. I couldn't tell you the name of a single character in this movie. There was main character, two girls, one of which was dating main character, dickhead who died in the pool, security guard, I guess also cowboy, redneck's girlfriend. I vaguely remember them. I'm already forgetting most of what happened in this movie, and I just finished watching it. I actually went and looked this up a little bit, trying to figure out what the heck some of these characters' names were. So little mind was paid to this, that this pair of characters were credited as just racist and racist's wife. So yeah, they did not care about characterization in this movie at all. It's just really, really, truly uninspired. I know it must be tough to, like, reinvigorate a formulaic franchise, and I had issues with that in the previous movie, but that one is a masterpiece compared to this one. This had straight to VHS written all over it. If not for the fact that it was glaringly obvious how much they actually spent on the CGI budget, and I think that entirely comes down to the post-filming conversion of throwing 3D objects at your face. There's one more to go. I'm not that excited for it, because that was a slog. But we have an entirely new director and a writer who actually has a few decent credits to their name. I mean, there's some garbage mixed in there too, but I have to think that the guy who wrote Arrival and was nominated for an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay could put together anything more competent than what I just watched. Having just watched that now, I'm now confident that was my first time watching this movie, unfortunately. Or, you know, maybe fortunately that I don't actually have to watch it twice. This movie was more bad than good, and the bad stuff was really bad. I don't know, it's just bad. I'm gonna give it like a 3 out of 10. That's basically entirely for that third act and the car wash sequence, which was just weird enough to get a little bit of extra credit from me. But oh man, I basically don't recommend you ever spend any of your time on that, despite the fact that it was notably the shortest of the 5 movies. It still isn't worth your time. The first time I'm seeing the WB logo at the start. Here I go, strapping myself in for number 5. Here's the New Line logo I was looking for. I was starting to miss it. This one came out in 2011, the shortest time between any two of these movies, weirdly enough. For the record, I do not recommend anyone watch the 8 hours of this franchise in the span of like 2 days. It's not gonna be a good way to spend your time. Okay, we got a whole new type of title sequence here, actually doing full-on opening credits with this shattering glass effect. Although I kind of hope they bring back the whole eerie thing where you just pan through weird imagery. It was cheesy, but I liked it. I kind of assume they're providing teases of how every character is gonna die through this, but I don't plan to pay enough attention to really register that. Hey, Tony Todd's back. Like, the whole point of doing this way is that I'm not making notes, you know? I'm doing it live. I love a good title sequence, and this one is decently cool. While I assume it wasn't, I hope this was done practically. That would be really fun. Just chuck things at glass over and over again? Film it in slow-mo? There you go. Opening title sequence. Hey, references to old movies. Maybe a handful of those were references. I think they were, like here we go with the Final Destination 2 log. Okay, potentially all those were references to old movies, not setups for this one. Guess they're carrying that forward from the previous movie. I thought that was kind of cool last time, so I'm good with it here too. Hey, a lead actor I actually recognize. That's promising. Oh, he's getting dumped. Brutal start. Worst death of the franchise. We got the punk rock girl and the sleazy boyfriend. Oh my god, this guy's in this movie. Big plus points. What is his name? David something? David Kuchner? That immediately makes me think that they're gonna lean into the comedy of this movie a little bit further. Do you know what? This movie is actually spending a hair of some time establishing the characters and their relationships, rather than jumping straight into the big death. Literally 1 second after I said that, the first ominous sign came up. 180 corporate consulting. I assume that number is referenced in literally every one of the movies, but I didn't actually catch it in all of them. The logging truck, I guess, is ominous for us, but not really this character. I like the idea that the events are set into place by a massive gust of wind, unlike the little whiffs that the Grim Reaper usually does. That's just kind of an effective payoff to the fact that death is always preceded by these little gusts. Suddenly, a big death is set into motion by a huge gust of wind. This feels vaguely familiar. I've potentially seen all of, if not part of this movie. Based on that, I'm literally just now realizing that this movie was also marketed as a 3D thriller. That guy coming out of the bathroom? That is amazing humor. I want more of that in this franchise. I have for sure seen this movie. I realize I just said that about the last movie and was wrong, but I have seen this one, I just don't remember it. The effects here are pretty decent. Like, it builds up some pretty serious tension. This whole catastrophe is paced out in a really effective way. A few characters are getting offed here and there, but there's no crazy thing that just kills like 30 people at once. So cables are snapping, things are falling, pieces of the bridge are crumbling away, there's constantly something new that they're trying to overcome. I mean, you basically know none of them are going to make it out of it, but it makes for a much more enjoyable set piece in the meantime. Don't rush through this. This first big death sequence is going to be very important to the rest of the movie. We're trying to kick things off with a bang here, and this movie's doing that very effectively. Oh, come on, that's horrific. Oh my god. That was amazing. His friend is a superhero. Don't both do it together, Jesus. I guess it worked out. Oh my god, the effects there are actually really good, and I'm appreciative that they're not swinging those cables in my face every 4 seconds. I've seen like 100 bridges collapse in every catastrophe and disaster movie ever made. I would say it's well done here. Just constantly out of the frying pan into the fire. There you go. There's the instantaneous realization of how things are going horribly wrong. That opening disaster set piece is on par with the one from Final Destination 2. I think this is quite possibly the goriest of the movies so far. There was a little bit more of that in the last film too, throwing a bunch of entrails and stuff at us. That's one thing that this movie seemingly carried forward. That's one other thing that this movie seemingly carried forward. I would recommend you keep running. I mean, that is far too early to just kind of quit. Courtney B. Vance is in this movie? I don't know if he's going to be in more than like one scene, but it's a pretty legit snag for this movie. But he might actually be like the best actor this franchise has ever had now. I don't want to see this in every single one of these movies, but it makes sense that agents of some kind would investigate the fact that someone predicted this major disaster. It's very funny that they chalk up the bridge collapse to high winds. That's kind of the whole point of this franchise in a way. I mean, not the whole point, you know what I'm saying. The gag that the boss thinks that this guy died in the accident is amazing. Having the characters react poorly and laugh at a funeral. The audience is supposed to have this weird intermingling of comedy and terror, and it's nice to see the characters having that as well. Oh, Dodie Todd, quick cameo to mess with everyone's minds. Looks like we're giving characters a minute to try to get back to their lives. going back to work, trying to reconnect with his girlfriend. They're all just chalking it up to a freak accident. After the crazy big set piece at the beginning, I think there's absolutely room for a little bit more character exploration. This franchise does need it. So they were breaking up as a matter of circumstance. It's because he had a job opportunity in France. That's kind of sad when that happens. And there's like a relatability here that they don't actually not love each other. They're showing a bit more of these characters dealing with trauma. This girl's just struggling to focus and put her mind to anything. They so rarely acknowledge that in the other movies. We're about a half hour in, and I'm shocked how they managed to fit in that giant set piece and quite a bit of character moments. In a 90-minute movie, it kind of shows me that they're paying attention to a 3-act structure. And I legitimately think that's a major part of why some of these movies feel better paced than others. It's just wild it took me this long to realize that was being handled so effectively. The elastic bands have been established previously. It's snapping. Oh, bad luck. I don't think the series usually pays mind to having individual characters recognize ominous events. Oh, I can't believe they're going water and electricity. Come on. But usually they just kind of unexpectedly die, and the main character either was or wasn't there in time to warn them. It's less specific to the individual character and more that anyone could potentially perceive their death. Oh, come on. The tension with that is insane. There's like a nail-biting quality to it. Oh, here's yet another way the Reaper's trying to mess with her. I bet this is another fake out. It also showed that this was mildly rickety, just like the tiniest bit. Oh, now someone else is on the beam. This is amazing. I don't know what role the fan's gonna play. Cameo from the first movie, I guess. I just love the way this movie clearly isn't in a hurry. If the entire point of these movies is these long, ridiculous, absurdly connected death sequences, then yeah, we should space them out as much as possible and make them as absurd and unpredictable as could be. The number of different things that... Oh, God. Oh, I literally can't show anything that just happened. But that might be the most that my stomach has lurched from one of these deaths in a while. That suspense is crucial. Tony Todd being a lurking weirdo. Well, apparently it was just for a second though. It's smart to have a few comedians in this movie. This guy's here just like stealing office supplies. Oh, he's specifically stealing from the people who died. That's horrible, but it's a clever way to have a laugh in this movie without people specifically mocking the deaths directly or anything sick like that. The idea that this guy's a player is just also kind of comedic gold, but he's also a bit of a dirtbag. Okay, turns out he's the world's biggest sleazeball. This guy's just comically sleazy, just the world's biggest shithead. I guess we just watched a very tragic death, and so there might be the chance that this one feels almost just. I assume the movie's purposely playing with us like that. I like that the cops at her death scene look at it and they're like, how the fuck did this happen? This scene has slowly been building up over a long time. It keeps cutting back and forth to it. She's loosening the table with some really intense chiropractic techniques. Now covering him in acupuncture needles. Oh. Falling on your acupuncture needles. I don't know if they would literally jab into you, but that would do some damage. But, you know, just to make sure he's not walking away from that anytime soon, they made sure to soak him in alcohol as well. You just gotta get out of this room, dude. I think a hospital's in order. Quit that. Quit doing that. The vibrating phone. That was well set up too. They told him multiple times that he couldn't have his phone. He thinks he got away with it yet again. And then the Buddha statue that he specifically commented on. Oh, he's so happy. I'm just so appreciative of the time being put into each of these so far. I don't need a dozen of them, just like 4 or 5 that are really, really well done. Oh, so he's still playing the same character. They actually only just now made sense of this character. That after presumably, I don't know, decades of being a coroner or mortician, he has seen it play out numerous times where survivors of a major disaster end up dying. It's something he's potentially worked out on his own. So they're adding more to this character while doing a bit of an exposition dump for us and the characters, who are all in a group so they can learn it at the same time. Minus the one girl. There's one girl here who didn't get to learn the whole crazy spooky system. Having a LASIK setup death just makes so much sense. I feel like around 2011 would have been when that surgery was becoming more common and a lot of people had a lot of fears surrounding it. He just leaves her in the room with her eye yanked open. What is this, Clockwork Orange? Also, I love that this water cooler is labeled as water. Oh my god, but more water and electricity. They're doing that twice in this movie. Although, it could just be another fake out. This movie does do more fake outs. At the very least, it isn't just a matter of an actual electric shock. But anyway, I'm laughing at this because it seems like something Brad Leone would say.
Water, ice water, but ice water, you see the water?
My god, did they actually reef this actress's eye open for the duration of this scene? Her eye looks super red, and it would just be easier to do that practically? It looks like it sucks. Oh no, you supercharged it. That wasn't meant to happen. Oh, come on. Oh, she just, oh god, all of it is horrible. Are those lasers actually that powerful? I have no idea, but this is horrible to watch. Oh, I'm just realizing what great foreshadowing it was that she accidentally popped the eye off her teddy. I thought that was gonna be a part of the death in some way. Just kidding, it was actually the death setup. So now 3 characters have died in these isolated scenes with insane setups. I like that there's an FBI agent who's realizing how absurd and contrived these all are. And now we're left with 4 characters who inarguably understand what's going on. So now moving into the 3rd act, a half hour left in the movie. The 4 of them and this FBI agent, I don't know, they can work together in some way to try and solve this. Pacing the plot and characters, I don't know, man. All of it is among the best this series has ever had. What a refresher after that 4th movie. Oh my god, if you ever watch these, skip that one for sure. Sam is actually realizing, all on his own, that characters are dying in the order they died in his premonition. And I guess in a way, this guy's conflict with this character, Roy, has been set up all movie. Oh god, at first you really think he makes it through and then it cuts to the blood pouring? That's part of why it matters to set up characters and their relationships ahead of time. Because then we can have a really short, efficient scene like this that has technically been revisited and set up about 4 separate times through the movie. Oh yeah, this guy is also going to be on the list. I guess he's only just now learning about this for the first time, and obviously he's going to be resistant to it. I mean, it makes sense that his boss would misinterpret and think he just got threatened. This character has been on a very believable spiral the whole movie. He accuses this guy of murder, and kind of in a way they're putting the pieces of this together. Okay, they did have one unexpected, sudden death, but it was still technically set up and existed to prove a point, confirming these characters' theory. Now they're all operating with the same knowledge base. Now they think that the rules are they need to kill someone in order to live. Not intervening, but for someone to actually trade places with them. That's dark, and something that was touched on before, but never really paid the mind it should have as an interesting way to drive this franchise in a new direction. There's not a lot of movie left to work with here, so I don't really know where they're gonna head to next. But I like the idea that this guy's now terrified in his job, realizing that a kitchen is filled with implements of death and destruction and burning and sharpness, basically everything bad. Oh, this sick shot of shaving meat and grinding meat. This feels like the opening sequence of Dexter. He has to do a simple menial task for his job and he's suddenly all rattled for the first time ever. He unplugs the machine, realizes he unplugged the wrong machine. The way in which it now feels impossible to do his daily tasks is something I like seeing these movies address. It reminds me of the way Alex started wigging out in the first movie and made his little safe cabin. I just saw something that I had to share. This movie was originally called Final Destination. Who in their right mind at any point thought that that would fly? This Peter character's life absolutely going to shit is believable. He's kind of lost everything. He knows he's next to go, and so he's basically making a pros and cons list of taking a life to save himself. This guy was up all night and debating whether or not he should be pushing people in front of cars and stuff to save himself. That's amazing. He's debating whether or not he deserves to die. This movie is shockingly pondering some pretty big questions. Sam admitted that Molly was the only one who survived in his premonition, that she got off the bridge. And Peter turns that into this whole debate of did she deserve to live? This is almost the exact scenario I wanted to play out in the 3rd movie. where I thought McKinley was showing up to the fireworks to kill someone, to save himself. We have the little setup there, but it's not his time. Oh, snap. I didn't see that coming. That was absolutely the wrong person to kill, dude. But I don't think that means he saved himself. It wasn't an intervention in his death. That was just a random act of violence now, separate from everything else. Oh god, but now he's worried about witnesses. This guy goes down a really dark path here, and that was a sick jump. Oh, come on, would you really kill your friend like that? I mean, it's already twisted that you're willing to do it at all. Oh man, did you really have to kill your friend? He was the one acting crazy. I know there's like self-defense or something, but couldn't you have just bashed him in the head with the pan and hope that he survived it? I don't know. Oh, they're bringing things full circle with the plane, are they? Just like a fun homage to where the series all started. Oh shit. I had to pause and look it up. I think they legitimately brought back those actors. Whatever that is, like 11 years later to film that from a new angle. This movie's a prequel? I didn't remember that at all. Oh, look at that. Do you know what the funny thing is, though? Is that based on the way the characters were dressed, I don't buy that at all. Considering how I specifically drew attention to that in that first movie. Dust in the Wind comes back on. He's getting a premonition, or at least eerie feelings, just a bit too late. That's actually a spectacular payoff. There's just no beating death, I guess. If the franchise were to end here, that would be kind of amazing. It's really interesting to see them completely recreate the sequence all these years later. A random piece of the wreckage comes flying off the plane. Oh, Roy was about to die anyways. It wasn't a life swap, which I guess means the life swap thing might not be true at all. I would say that was pretty rock solid. The countdown, that's pretty great. And now we're just doing like a highlight reel, I guess? It's a funny way to, I don't know, pay respect to what came before in the franchise. You know, if they never make another one of these movies, which reportedly they are, at least it ended on a relatively high note. I don't know how this movie and the one before had the same budget, came out only 2 years apart, and this one had such notably better effects. I guess it probably comes down to better directing, or maybe a different studio handled the effects. I don't know. It's almost stunning, comparatively, how bad the fourth movie is compared to the rest. But I kind of feel like I could go on and on praising the fifth. The pacing is maybe the best the series has ever had. The death scenes are varied and elaborate. The character motivations and general relationships are by far the best they've ever been. And this movie brought back that tone balance from the second installment, keeping things a little lighthearted and fairly comedic. The fifth movie is potentially the goriest of all them, which isn't necessarily my thing. I don't really need to see guts and blood spewing everywhere. I believe you can get a really good reaction out of people without that. And I don't think there was really a bad actor in the bunch. Miles Fisher was probably the best actor in it, maybe followed by Jacqueline McInnes Wood. I really wish they would have done more with the comedic actors. Like David Kushner didn't really have anything to do in this movie. The other comedic guy, I'm sorry I don't know his name, he had some great scenes. They did nothing with David. At least our lead was stronger in this movie, but I was a little disappointed that Courtney B. Vance had like 2 scenes and they really didn't do a lot with him. Maybe Molly was one of the weaker in the bunch, but I think the more limited cast count helped a lot because you didn't have to find time for all these nameless characters. I think the 3-act structure worked incredibly well. They took the series in some interesting new directions, they framed things in a meaningful new way, and they tied the whole franchise back together. It didn't have a lot of plot, but I think it paid more mind to the characters than ever. I didn't see this movie in theaters, I don't know exactly how the 3D worked, and as I've said, I kind of hate 3D regardless, so I'm never going to give that as a pro for these movies, but I have read reviews that have said that because it was filmed in 3D, not a post-filming conversion, it actually really popped, was really effective, worked well, and like many critics have said, it was like the best use of 3D that they had ever seen. This franchise does end on a strong note. I think, for me, I'm gonna place it at like a 7.5. I don't know if it's just high expectations, nostalgia, what it is. Even though I think this was probably the better movie, I still think number 2 was the better viewing experience. More things from that movie are gonna stick with me for longer, and, you know, notably have. So now let's get into some rankings. Number 4, by far the worst. Just kind of an abysmal movie. I hope you never have to sit through it. Then, maybe followed by the first movie, it deserves some credit for an interesting premise, handling it all quite well. Things were mostly done practically, so they didn't have to worry a lot about effects, and so it aged better than I expected it to. The third movie is maybe just a little bit above that, even though I do take some issues with that movie. I didn't really hate it, and it's absolutely carried by better acting. There are just certainly some things that could have been handled better, and it's a shame that it's held back in those small ways. Now, I'm really struggling to decide between the second and fifth movie. I think a lot of what the fifth movie did well are things the second movie did well first. And I really liked that that movie stuck to having everyone run around together, and this collaborative way they were all trying to save each other. I've also just seen it so many times and it's just so burned into my brain. Maybe I'm biased, but I think I still like that second movie better. I don't know, I'm splitting hairs here. I'm trying to make excuses for why I still prefer the second movie, but the fifth one is damn good for this franchise. I generally have had a soft spot for it for many years now. I acknowledge that none of them are that good of movies. So originally I was going to end this video with me then ranking all of the different big elaborate set pieces and the individual deaths, and I'm just exhausted. This took so much longer than I thought it would, and I insisted on getting it done before Halloween, starting off this potential annual tradition. I really should have picked a franchise that has like 3 movies, but I just have such specific ties to this one that I hoped would motivate me and carry me through the amount of work that it would end up being and did end up being. I might end up putting together an entirely separate video. I don't know, that's probably something that's going to be more watchable anyways. Do you want to watch 2.5 hours of someone talking over a movie, or do you want to watch his ranking of a specific small micro? I don't know. I'm just acknowledging that I know this is going to be a lot and that it's different for the channel and not a lot of people are going to be interested, but it just seemed like a fun project and quite experimental for me, so I was happy to try it out. We'll see what everyone thinks. Don't forget to go check out the Patreon. I don't do a ton with it. Mostly I post developer interviews whenever I make a Flashlight episode. That's the number one thing I do there. There's a bit of a catch-22 there, because the more I do over there, I'm sure the more attractive it would be to join in on. But yeah, I am going to plug it here and hopefully put some more time into that sometime soon. I guess I'm going to render this behemoth out and basically go to bed. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Thank you to patrons of the channel. Happy Halloween, everyone, and I hope to see you again soon.